Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we come to the next phase of our discussion on sustainable development. To take a case in point, nowadays, when they design an IIT or an IIM, there is a huge discussion, a participative discussion, say from the students, faculty, and the staff, as to how they want things. Like, the students would want their academic area just next to the campus so that they can quickly walk across the lab, come back, take a quick nap, go back, again come back in the middle of the night without any care for the safety and security, seamless movement up and down. The staff would want an area from where they can easily exit and easily enter without really disturbing the academic environment or the working environment. So they will want space management in a manner in which they are able to attend to their tasks without much disturbance. The faculty would want some faculty privacy, yet areas where the faculty can seamlessly access the students and easy access to the academic rooms and the labs, and they would want some washrooms and some resting spaces woven in so that they really don't need to exit the campus a number of times for even mundane requirements. This kind of traffic discussion between the stakeholders many times by itself leads to sustainable development. Am I making a point, Mr. Yatin Pandya?
Very much so. I think institution also has multiple functions, and right from the design stage, then to construction, and then to operational. So therefore, if it is conceived in a holistic manner, then it definitely becomes a win-win situation in terms of its efficiency of function, as well as those things integrated right from the design. So that doesn't become an appendage for an afterthought. So I think that is definitely a good start.
Now, reintroducing my panel, on to my left is Mrs. Prabha Jain, the architect, the director. On to my extreme right is Mr. Doi Jode, the joint director. And right next to me is Mr. Yatin Pandya, the well-known architect and an expert on sustainable development from Ahmedabad. Mr. Pandya, as we construct the discussion a little more ahead, I also feel that at times you find a few areas that can lend itself as landscape assets. Occasionally, we feel that this earth should be thrown off. Somebody says, no, seize the earth, make a little landscape, have some Korean grass, have some native plants, have a marriage of convenience, have a little cesspool, throw in a statue somewhere, and it really creates a Victorian garden. Rather than scrap everything and make a Maidan. Your view, please.
Yeah, I think first, the design has to respond to the lay of the land. So, land and soil is a resource in more than many ways. One, of course, it's a space resource. Then it's a reproducible resource. So what you plant, if you can plant fruit trees, flowering trees, and also something that would sustain the needs, daily needs of the canteen or something like that. And the land even as a material resource. I'll give you an example. One of the institutes they were working on in the outskirts of Ahmedabad. See, typically the land originally would have been a farmland or so, and then the urban infrastructure comes later. So it's a very standard condition where the roads, etc., have come later and are higher than your land. And just the gut response is that call hundreds of trucks, let them spend so much on the fuel, etc., and from somewhere digging it, exporting it to another site, and level it and make it raised. Instead, very sustainable practice, very common sensible practice is the cut and fill. You can, in fact, while designing, conceive that this kind of spaces could be dug below the ground to certain extent so they don't become dingy conditions, and that soil itself can be now parked onto the rest of the land so that now you become higher than the road area so that it is not a condition for water flooding, etc. And now from where you dug up the soil, it becomes a naturally earth insulated, earth bummed kind of a space and condition, which even helps in kind of environmental management in terms of heat mitigation, etc. So it's a win-win. You don't have to import or export the soil. You can get multiple space variations with levels, etc. And that kind of a subterranean space becomes, in a hot, dry climate, a very successful, naturally insulated from the extreme heat,
Excellent,
a comfortable
excellent.
space.
Mr. Pandya, with your permission. So how I would interpret it for our common audience is that, let us say there is a little place available to you, from 5 meters away from that you want to make a manicured and a half unmanicured garden. So you want some earth. So rather than immediately commuting earth from anywhere and everywhere, where you are going to create a disaster, because it is going to be dug up from somewhere. It could be fertile soil. It could be soil which is holding on to a structure. It could cause erosion. So rather than get into all that, a responsible way would be to find a balanced methodology of cut and fill. So let us say you cut some earth, use it for that elevation, and where you have cut, you can even create an amphitheater.
Yes.
You can cut a little more, come out with a little more earth, create berms, and like you said, that it will create a berm induced insulation, and go for steps inside, and partial steps can be left open so that people can access easily and come out and go out. Now, it was very, very well and secondly brought out. Thank you. Mrs. Prabha Jain, occasionally you would have heard that we speak about compact designs. What would be the argument? People say compact design will reduce circulation, reduce road network, so it is too good. Whereas some people will say, no, I need breathing space, green lung, I would need spaced out facilities, so that I am able to have some kind of a synergy between a working space and a relaxing space, so that they are interspersed. So this is a conflict, essentially, like all conflicts are. So your view, how do you think a campus should be normally designed with a view to sustainable development?
Yes, that's a very interesting question, and very interesting for the architect from the design perspective. All sorts of sites we come into being. Some pose major constraints in terms of space, in terms of many other factors, in terms of its location, in terms of its natural vegetation, in terms of its elevation, in terms of its terrain, and so on and so forth. Right? But every challenge can be really converted into a very positive effect in terms of designing. The thing can be achieved by properly integrating the interior design with the exteriors. So these two are viewed from the design point of view a very continuous space. A living space needn't necessarily be just the built environment. Even the external environment also can impart to a living space, to have a congregation gathering. Like I still remember, I have nostalgic memory of my college in SAP in Chennai. Like where our corridors were all elevated, it was a sunken side, and we had the courtyards all around. It's a very beautiful space where we get together very often, and have fun. So such sort of space can be really created. Compact design does not mean that it is going to suffocate. Even in a compact design, we can even give like good balconies where it opens into the areas or in surrounding areas. We can even steal the view of the next site from my balcony. The next park in the other side of the road can be viewed and enjoyed by me from my balcony. So there are ways and means when we really perceive the environment along with the building and design.
Thank you.
May I add one more point here?
Yeah.
That, outdoor spaces, they are not wasteful spaces. Culturally and climatically, many activities in a particular time of the day better get conducted outdoors, especially in an institutional campuses. So we have to see it as an open living room rather than that. So it adds to Dr. Jain's kind of proposition of humane factors and view factor and comfort factor, but it's also a space that is a utility space, and in good environment that is preferred over the closed environment.
Mr. Pandya, thank you very much. Taking the discussion a little more forward, so spaces there are a number of companies of architects which are named as spaces. So the architects are tied down to their spaces, So I have one onto my left and two onto my right, and obviously they will be celebrating the use of maximum spaces. But then all said and done, I do agree, granted, but then there should be complete and absolute respect for the environment in using the spaces. And if you take our minds to the first session where we spoke about reduce, reuse and recycle, the whole idea was cities' resources should not be consumed ruthlessly by every little structure that is coming up in the city. Like I am trying to treat city as a unit for sustainable development. Right. Sustainable development is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It could be for the whole world. So that is how people win United Nations awards when they do sustainable development. But then point is, when you bring it to the micro level, sustainable development is for even this very hall where we are sitting and doing our job. So otherwise this could have been a huge room. Whereas we have reduced it in a manner in which in the studio somebody can sit somewhere and somebody can talk somewhere and somebody can work somewhere and somebody can edit somewhere. So it is all possible within the same place. Mrs. Prabhachain, I do fully agree what you said, that you can give a small little well manicured open space between 4 living rooms and make that single space accessible both in view reach to all of them, because all of them are not going to use it at the same time. More often than not, today's world doesn't permit everybody to synchronize their free time. So anybody might walk through that lawn, move away, and then somebody might else find the time to do so. Further, when we look at the very fact of trying to say use less fresh water, imagine, less fresh water, less load on the city's fresh water. Less fresh water, more creative use of the wastewater. Less fresh water, a thought that we should save water. So just the question of a less fresh water lends itself to so much of interpretation. Yeah. And when you do less fresh water, and when you have a immediate term that would come to the mind would be an STP. Whereas an STP is a beaten solution, it takes actually quite some investment. But then, yes, an STP is going to help because it is going to reduce the waste that is going to be connected to the city's drainage, the city's cleaning systems. So, Mr. Pandya, you were trying to talk about one day when we were discussing that, you have got methodologies where the same waste with anaerobic environment, right, with plants that spread roots and grow on that waste, right, using pebbles so that the waste seamlessly sieves in and sucks in, and then it probably in a controlled environment with zero maintenance treats itself and throws out the right water. Yeah, so nearby somewhere you have used it. Can you just throw some light?
Yeah, in the institute nearby we have done that. It's called Environmental Sanitation Institute. But you're talking about one of the methods practiced very widely in Europe. It's a very natural system called root zone system. And the words itself explain what it is about. That you dig a kind of a pit in which you put just the pebbles without the kind of, any soil or so. And you have below 6 inches of the top level, about 5 feet deep, and 1:5 proportion length to width is the kind of pit you should have, so that it has a longer passage to travel. You put silage in a pipe with a hole about 6 inches below the top surface. So first the water and the silage tries to sink in. The pebbles help in filtering the solid part. Then it all settles with the water below, and because of that, the roots of the plant species of the family called Australis phragmatis, and those plant species roots are very fibrous. They thrive on the impurities coming from the silage, and those kind of roots may have these bacterial activity under the closed condition, and they would decompose the waste into basic component and separates the water, and this water is treated to an extent that you can then use it for irrigation, or in this institute we have also used it with double piping back into flushing. So nobody touches it. It doesn't come in human contact, and it is treated enough for these two purposes for which you can use it. So all your bathroom and even some of the silage from the other waste can directly be used without, and this is no electricity kind of a component. So it's a natural system, and in fact the kind of greenery that grows give you a green patch to work with, and it is all below ground, so there is no smell or mosquito or stuff like that. So it's an efficient system, it is a land-based system, and the given condition it can definitely be tried out.
Excellent. Now taking ourselves to a little macros, a macro thought. When you plan in university, there can be many models. In some model, they will have the academic blocks in the center. Onto one side, they will have staff residences. Onto the other side, they will have student hostels. And onto another side, they will have all common facilities. IIT Delhi is such an example. Now further, when you look at, sometimes they will have special blocks for all shared facilities, theatres, teaching labs, etc., and different buildings for departments. IIT Kanpur is an example. Mr. Yatin Pandya, sometimes the whole game is about how should you spread out the facility. I believe that lends itself to the macros of the sustainable development.
Right.
Some view, please.
Yeah. No, it starts with when you began that compaction. Now, it's not undue compaction, but at the same time, it's not undue segregation where you have to need another kind of transport to go from one department to the other, or intermediate spaces are all wasted. So actually, you can take advantage of the masses of the built form for mutual shading, for creating built around courtyards, for a kind of activities under the shade, etc. So as far as possible, they should be mutually agreeable, and based on their scale of the height and number of floors, etc., I think you could compose the built mass in a way that northeast side has the lower mass and the southwest side has the taller mass, so that during the sun's path which goes from east, south and west, so most of the day, through the day, you get shade from the southwest, which in fact keeps the terraces of the lower mass next to it shaded, and then further the northeast. So even in terms of activity grouping, let's say you have the nighttime activity, let's say the staff quarters, let's say the student hostel in the southwest, and that is relatively taller, and the academic block or the daytime use activities are relatively in northeast and partly sunken, then through the day the southwest would take the brunt, but that is to be used at night. And as we know, southwest is also good time for the breeze, or good orientation for the breeze. So in the evening with a good cross ventilation, that would also cool off faster. You would get breeze when you need it at the night to sleep, and in daytime it would offer shade to the rest of the activities. So you can take advantage of this mutual shading.
In a very, very quick time frame, you have brought some beautiful points of architecture. So you will appreciate that northeast in the daytime gets shaded.
Right.
The southwest in the night cools off.
Right.
So that is how we are trying to say that the southwest in the daytime is taking the brunt,
Right.
whereas in the nighttime it is cooling off. And you said that the northeast is fit for a daytime activity inter alia, and you are trying to go out and say that therefore where can the nighttime activity be planned and where can the daytime activity be planned. If it is Kala Kshetra, if it is Rabindra Tagore's institution, if it is modern day IITs where there are nights and days which are blending into each other and students want to sit and study. So you need all this to be put together. So Mr. Doijode, when we look at campuses, we always see that there are some wastelands in the campuses where people say that there are ravines here, or people say that there is a nala flowing here, or people say that this portion is not lending itself to building construction development. So in your quick mind, how do you think such areas can be treated in a campus, wherein such areas also form part of the campus?
Sir, like you see our own campus of where we are located, there is a nala passing through the campus, and which a very dramatic way we are using it in a golf course also, and towards to the main street. So here we have already utilized in a very proper and dramatic fashion. In the similar fashion, if we contemplate it with the retaining wall and give some design features, we can also use it for other activities as such.
Thank you. So now, very, very well brought out. Mr. Pandya wanted to ask you, sometimes during topographical surveys, sometimes they write that the green finger extends itself from A to B and C to D. Some light on that.
No, so see, any opportunity, as I said, lay of the land is one and the composition of soil is the other. There are some areas which are very rocky and may not be too prone to the vegetation or such kind of uses versus some which are naturally fertile or can be planted with trees, etc. So first, definitely the principle of sustainability, don't cut a tree. Actually, it's a design challenge that if you have trees placed in a particular way, how do you weave in your built form around that? Not only that, but you plant as many more trees even for microclimate. So tree is not just a romantic or a kind of emotional element, but tree, one, as I say, can bring in the shade in a hot and dry time. Even if you sit under a banyan tree, it gives you reasonable comfort. So you have to see that again southwest, and if you have a tall and shade giving trees, then the air would also cool itself and come in. So these green corridors become a kind of a microclimate producers and a very good advantage in order to cool the breeze, in order to even filter the breeze. They can even become a noise barrier to if it is on a roadway or etc. And of course, trees give you something, not only the wood, but depending on the way that you plant. For example, in our projects, we tend to take into account the seasons. So you can appreciate different seasons. Right now, if you have a mango tree, it would start blooming and fruiting accordingly. Then you have jamun, then you have chiku, then, and many of these trees don't demand much. So not only they give shade, but they also give you the produce, even the kind of things for vegetable, etc. So you could in fact become self-sufficient on many of these needs. So even selection of landscape species for its shade advantage, for its kind of produce advantage, for its seasonal blooming, flowering and fruiting, as well as the kind of dust and the heat absorption.
Very, very nicely brought out. Mrs. Prabha, like sometimes we say that the whole battle, again I had pointed that towards you when I started off about the compact design. So now sometimes the whole battle is between whether the design should be compact or the design should be dispersed. And they say that finally, willy-nilly, in a city, in a growing country where spaces are at a premium, compact designs are chosen more because they are vital, they are inward looking, they are human scale adaptable. However, once you identify the functional requirements, then as an architect you will be looking at the forms and then you will be marrying them together. So to my mind, I want to know from you, how do you think artificial landscape plays a role in compact campuses? Because finally, the eye also needs a soothing environment. Finally, it is about the spirit of the environment, the theme of the environment. So you want a Nalanda to be created on the shores of the Sabarmati. So how do you go about it, ma'am?
Definitely, it's a challenge to have very enormous green spaces in a very compact site. But all said and done, after a compact design, the leftover spaces can very well be treated and created very interesting spaces for the inhabitants of that building. So yes, these will require to be artificially created because they do not, first of all, they are very smaller in scale. Second, they are really have to be created because naturally they are not present, because they might be present in terms of setbacks, they might be present in terms of spaces between two buildings. So these are the sort of spaces that we will come across. So such spaces can also be beautifully designed and created. Suppose, for example, an offsetted building might create a walkway which is really zigzagging or going crossways instead of a straight corridor, which is very monotonous.
I'll take on from here. Very well brought out, Mrs. Prabha. I remember a few English movies when I see those Victorian colleges. They are specifically designed in a manner in which the pathway is zigzag, or maybe the Europeans had even more bigger reason behind that. But my mind says that it gives you a beautiful walkway, an opportunity to enjoy a bit of a nature, because they have strategically positioned their trees and meanders. And so, like for example, ma'am, if you see behind Mr. Doijode, you would have seen that where the location for the Coast Guard is coming up in Lake Abada. There you would have seen that there are some ravines. If that ravine is given a proper land rehabilitation, stormwater management and soil conservation through erosion control and new planting of correct native species plants without overdoing the expenditure, don't you feel that that can create an visual paradise?
Yes, sir. To my mind, I believe the entire street from our campus where it starts, the IIPH, NIPER, IIT Gandhinagar, all these campuses, they all are of these kind of sites, and they have very dramatically used the areas
Available
of the
ups and downs.
Natural
Now you have, why I will actually support you very vehemently,
Sir.
very strongly, not vehemently, very strongly, is because when you look at the golf course in the Southwestern Air Command,
Yes, sir.
it is adjoined by a few ravines exactly. But it has come out pretty well because you have created a proper facility. However, Mr. Yatin Pandya, coming to you, look at the Sabarmati. I would give it to the PM and his thoughts as to the river promenade,
Yes.
which has come up so well. It has lent itself to a multifunctional riverfront. Now look at the ravines like we were talking about already getting developed in quite a few places in Ahmedabad. And now you look at the central vistas that are getting developed in Ahmedabad. Nearer to this place is a place where a near huge area you have developed something like a central vista. A minute please.
Yeah, no, like we used to have chalks and medans as the traditional ways of putting. But when talking about natural feature, it was always a part of a lay of the land. For example, whenever there is a raised mound in a natural topography of a city, talking of macro scale, this always had, kind of drained off the rainwater into one depression, which in local language is called Bodu. So even city of Ahmedabad, you have Malav Talav, you have Vastrapur Talav, you have as many talavs. So these are the ones which naturally took care of the drainage of the water so city wouldn't flood. And then around that would be a kind of a development with vegetation, etc. So city does not always have to be a city of river. Like Udaipur, it can be city of lakes, and even city of Ahmedabad, which otherwise is considered dry, has the presence of many of these. Kakaria is well known, then Chandola is very big. Then, as I said, every neighborhood has a depression which would naturally collect water and become a very nice feature for the local city. I want to add one thing for the very compact places that you mentioned. There are three still strategies unexplored yet. One is the rooftop. We often leave it as abandoned. Even city of Mumbai, which always craves for the city, space. But I have yet to see a good development on the terrace. And in Ahmedabad, we have 70-year-old example from Mr. Lee Corbusier, where the rooftop was put to productive use like vegetation and vegetables, but also lawn and all that. So citizens can come out and sit, and even public spaces like all the apartment kids with a high parapet can safely play there, etc. So one unexplored area and to be tapped is the rooftops, so terraces, etc. Ahmedabad had a nice tradition. People used to sleep out, or even we have kite flying festival happening on the terraces. The second one is vertical landscape. Nowadays you can have walls with even natural plants which would not only green it, create microclimate, but also beautiful environments. And third is element of water. Nature also means water, and even your own water system. For example, rooftop water by gravity comes down. Can we not integrate it in a system which was very well done in the traditional palace of Mandu? It's called Jahaj Mahal because it is sited between two water ponds. That's why it's like a ship. One entire catchment's water comes into Munj Talav, which is at a higher level. Once manually lifted up, it goes by gravity into the sort of three-dimensional water channels, into hammams at different levels. Then it comes by gravity into fountain, and then through the Mughal Chadar, it comes into Kapurthala, which is at a lower level. So no drop of water is wasted, but it creates beautiful microclimate. It becomes very spatially kind of interesting very well connected system of water.
Mr. Pandya, taking it on from here. Gentlemen, now coming back to how we can use it in the military engineering services, that when we are asked to design a campus, so I will connect you immediately to what we see at the IIT here, Mrs. Prabha. We were mentioning some time back. You have got that academic spine. Basically, there are a few buildings which have formed the spine. And then you have got green connectors. The green connectors are a network of secondary open spaces. Right. And then you have found that there are a few sports fields which have not actually come up and sprung up. They have used the space in between the two and they have tucked in. And then you are finding a boundary plantation and a residential plantation. Now, occasionally what happens is that this is a modern campus. Let me go to a olden day campus. In the olden day campus, I look at Annamalai University. Annamalai University, the Chettiars of Annamalai, what they had done was that they had planted trees so well that in front of the cafeteria, in front of the college campus, in front of the student hostels, in front of the office blocks, you find different kind of trees. For the workspaces, such are the trees that lend help to the workspace. Yes. Whereas to the academic area, you find trees under which a whole class can be conducted.
Canopy.
Yes, canopy trees. How nice. Yeah, whereas next to the residential quarters, you find trees that go vertically without eating away there. Yes. And so now what happens is that when you were telling about the vertical landscaping, at times it need not even hug the wall. It can be there even without hugging the wall. The whole, yes. The point is that when you create bottle palms in a particular row, it is going to create a green curtain.
And shade from
yes, and the next part is that we have seen the cascading nature of water which finds its own level. So like you said, we can create cascades of water with limited earth holders. And then you can recycle them so that it is a sustainable green belt system from bottom till top.
And microclimate.
And a microclimate can be arranged. Gentlemen, you can so find it that there are a few campuses, there are a few housing societies. You just go inside, immediately you find a little happiness. Now there are a few carcinogenic plants, they can be avoided. There are a few plants that are not too human friendly, they can be avoided. There are a few plants which are not eaten by blue bulls or stray animals. They can be encouraged. There are plants that sustain such animals and birds. They can also be encouraged at different areas. Some area you can create as a bird feeding area where you can slowly create a microcosm with a small little lake there. And so it can be an evening sit out. So
some are butterfly friendly, some
100%.
are where the things nest, otherwise no.
How beautifully you have brought it out, sir. I found that when you are traveling from Daman, when you are going, you are finding such spots, so many of them, that it is a treat to watch. Ladies and gentlemen, therefore, while we were discussing about a few macros of sustainable development, yesterday we were a bit onto the micros. There are places where in the run of Kutch, Mr. Pandya has been part of a little team which had dug up some earth from a particular place. That's a near desert. Run of Kutch is a near desert. So they had picked up some earth from a particular place and used it for a few houses because the Kutchi houses are lending themselves to a wall made of mud and a thatched roof which is climate friendly for that area. Now they make it ornamental by beautification with colors inside. Now after using the same, the spare earth was spread out in a particular place which was unused and was uneven thus far, which became an agricultural land, and from where they dug out the earth became a lake, and it became a sustainable environment, and it started greening itself, and look at it after 5 years how it looks. So ladies and gentlemen, sustainable development is there in the micros as well as in the macros. Here we come to the conclusion of our second phase of discussion. Soon we will move to our third phase of discussion. Thank you.